will share the result.
Yes. All right, let me start off with a disclaimer or a statement. Good day, everyone. Before we begin, please note that this meeting is untiled and will be recorded for our YouTube channel. We anticipate a very engaging open discussion. MLPS was created on December 10th, 2022, on the foundation of hosting lectures open to all topics familiar to Freemasonry, but not limited to those for the betterment and improvement of the craft. We are a public organization that is not Grand Lodge sanctioned. We welcome everyone for enlightenment and growth. To cover some ground rules, MLPS internationally extends fraternal greetings and fellowship with all siblings in a friendly and social manner. Our lectures are not a platform to engage in jurisdictional issues, but highly encourage fostering diversity, inclusion, harmony, and respect for all. As a disclaimer, any views expressed and or opinions shared are solely the opinions of the participants and are not a reflection of their Grand Lodges nor lodges of membership. Therefore, please keep all conversations open to the public and on a level. Thank you. Now, I would like to introduce our brother, Estevan, who will be talking about different, I guess, subjects within his book. And I guess we can go ahead and get started. This one?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so as many of you may know, I was invited to present my book, which I will gladly do. However, it can be done in a short sentence. There are 52 mini essays, one for each week of the year, about 52 different topics for Masons and even non-Masons to contemplate on, to ponder, to think. To meditate would be probably too much. Just think and give it a thought. So I would rather share what prompted me to start writing it and how I picked my topics. I started to write about Freemasonry about 7, 8 years ago. I mean, in English. Before that, back in Europe, where I was made a Mason and where it was customary that at every bi-weekly meeting, we had a lecture paper presented by a brother. It was called The Piece of Architecture, like a blueprint of architecture. And after it was presented, the brothers of the lodge had the discussion in a quite intelligent manner. Now, here in Canada a while back, and I mean years ago, I started a Masonic blog where I shared my thoughts about different aspects of Masonry. It's basically, as I was going on my journey and as I learned more and more about Freemasonry in general and in Ontario, Canada in particular. Now, here comes the social media. For many of us, I think it meant an opportunity to connect with men, like-minded men, yes, from around the world, and to have a more direct contact and a way to communicate more directly with many, many Masons around the world. So unfortunately, this dream or expectation turned out to be completely false or maybe too idealistic. The social media, for some unknown reasons, brought out the worst from people who participated, from everybody who participated in these online discussions. And these discussions became an enormous source of frustration for almost everybody. Now, The reason was that instead of lively discussions on an intellectual level that should be expected in Freemasonry, oh, just in parentheses, nobody was really expecting some kind of scholarly academic level of exchange of ideas, but at least a kind of intellectual minimum to be able to formulate our own ideas or opinions in a comprehensive manner, and also being able to listen to other opinions, and finally to confront ideas, arguments on a rational intellectual level without resorting to personal attacks, ad hominem attacks, so to speak. So, in short, Freemasonry on social media is a disaster. The only benefit, at least from my personal point of view, was that I did meet a few like-minded men, and actually even women, in the places where this was, to say, normal and permitted to have also women participating in our discussions and groups. So I could find these people and to communicate with them on a totally different level. And they really made me feel being among brothers and sisters. And with quite a number of them, even outside of these social media channels, we which are sometimes crazy and infested, but even outside of those, I could maintain lasting relationships, even though I did not meet them personally. Well, actually, Glenn is one of those from among these present here. So these groups, as I noticed, they were full of misinformation, ignorance, stupid theories, fake knowledge. And actually, I consider half-educated people more dangerous than uneducated, totally dumb. So out of this frustration, after trying to explain so many basic notions that every Mason should learn during his apprenticeship, before starting to speak up in public. So seeing how much knowledge is missing, how much misinformation is spread around, I started to jot down little text in which I was trying to clarify certain basic ideas, like what is initiation? Why do we need initiation? So, I mean, the whole concept, and not only Masonic initiation, because it has a way more general cultural relevance, and many other notions that were either borrowed from biblical texts or some other traditions in Freemasonry, and continuing with many aspects of our craft, from the use of music to the basic tenets, to the landmarks, and many other topics, sorry, that in my experience needed to be addressed and clarified. Sometimes I just wrote down certain basic knowledge, for example, how a text should be analyzed, or how music should be performed in the lodge. Why do we need ritual? And just to give you an idea, for this latter one about the ritual, I took an idea and the quote from one of the most beautiful children books, The Little Prince, because I wanted to make it simple, to make it easy to digest, and to, at the end, to give my brothers a little handbook, assuming they are willing to read and learn and think, to offer them a guide that maybe to direct the diligent Mason through an entire year to go through the 52 topics related to Freemasonry and hopefully acquiring some tools, skills that would help the readers to have a better understanding when and be better prepared when they encounter another text in their journey. Being able to analyze, being able to look behind it, being able to understand it, taking it apart and then putting back. Yeah, you got the idea. So this was what we might call the genesis of the book. Right now, I would like to take three topics from this book and present them briefly because they are all related. They were even titled like Schism number 1, Schism number 2, and Schism number 3. And it's all about the history. And I know that not everybody is a history buff, but they were such defining moments in the history of the Universal Freemasonry that no matter where you are a Mason, no matter where you were made a Mason or what kind of obedience jurisdiction you belong to, no matter what kind of Masonic body you belong to, or what kind of ritual are you working, I think, I'm convinced, that these three defining moments determine, and not only in the past, but even till today, Freemasonry for everyone. They determine the good and bad and ugly, if you will. So let's quickly go through those three schisms. And after giving you the very basic information about each of them, I will tell you why I thought they should be in this book of mine, and after which, of course, I really would like to hear your opinion about those. So now, before I proceed, I want to challenge you all, as I intended to do with my readers. My immediate past grandmaster who wrote the foreword to my book called it a provocative little book. I was very happy with that. Uh, and it is provocative because I challenge many of the commonplaces so mechanically repeated in our Masonic lore. And quite often I call them lies. Yes, we lie a lot to each other, to others, and to everyone. We say think without thinking because we were told and taught without thinking, and we mentor, not convince the right use of that word here, so we mentor next generations without thinking. And I think it's time to stop. So let's look at the very first schism. There is even a book with that title by Rick Berman. So the ancient Grand Lodge. If you read the usual Masonic history manuals, you are presented with a seemingly continuous, smooth development of the English Freemasonry for the past 300 years. We celebrated the creation of that first Grand Lodge just a few years ago. It started in London in 1717, hence the 300th anniversary in 2017. And it's still there. I mean, the UGLE, the United Grand Lodge, is still there today. But that's only half of the story. And omitting the rest is almost like lying. Because in 1751, that first Grand Lodge, the premier Grand Lodge, as the literature calls it, was seriously challenged because they made a lot of innovations in ritual, customs, requirements, degrees, etc. To put it bluntly, they deviated from the original and used the whole idea to serve a small, dedicated group's interest, but that's a different story. So, and Masons who were aware of the living traditions simply formed a new Grand Lodge to restore the ancient usages, hence the name Ancients. And they nicknamed the 1717 Anderson and Desaguliers Grand Lodge the Moderns. And if you visited lodges in the USA and Canada and the UK, you could notice the differences in ritual. And now we focus exclusively only on English-speaking places, practically the former British colonies. So most of the US inherited their rituals from the ancients, while Canada, for example, from the moderns. And finally, after 60 years of competition, the two competing Grand Lodges made peace and amalgamated. They formed the new United Grand Lodge. That's why they have that united word in their name, because two existing Grand Lodges came together and created a hybrid monster. It's structure and bureaucracy taken from the moderns, and the ritual mainly based on ancients, which ritual was also stripped of all esoteric elements, mainly by the Duke of Sussex, the first Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge for 30 years. Yes, you heard it, 30 years. Until he died from 1813 till 1843. Now, personally, I have to confess, I like many of his ideas. And I also agree with most of his actions. Uh, my issue is that we don't talk about it. We pretend it didn't happen. And here is a small funny detail. During that 60 years of competing Grand Lodges in England, the Grand Lodges of the other two home Grand Lodges, Ireland and Scotland, they considered regular, another crazy word we just throw around all the time without thinking. So they considered regular not the original 1717 modern Grand Lodge, but the other one, the allegedly schismatic ancients. Now that puts in a different light all the controversies regarding legitimacy, legitimate origin, etc., or the 3 or 4 letter craziness, which the latter things, which is so liked by many of our American brothers, leads us to a next schism. I am going chronologically. It happened next in time. And this is the Prince Hall Masonry. As you all might remember, and I'm trying to be very short here, this happened initially only in the USA, and incidentally, during those 60 years, while two Grand Lodges existed in London. So the story started before the Independence War, and I don't even know if it ended ever. Now, I always have to give you a warning when I talk about this issue. In my Central Eastern European bloc, also known as the former Soviet bloc, I grew up and I didn't see in real life a non-white person until I was around 20. Well, of course, we read books, we saw movies, but on the street of my hometown, it was probably around the time when I was 20, which is also a very long time ago, more than 50 years ago, when I saw first time and whole my town, and everybody was just standing there with open mouth, and wondering what, because it was something never seen before. Now, next. when in my 40s, as a humanitarian aid worker, I served in the Caucasus Mountain during the Second Chechen-Russian War. So I know that Caucasian is an idiotic term without any scientific basis or merit. So I'm not willing to use this PC, politically correct lingo. Sorry. Now, back to the schism. We know that this schism started when a legit lodge with warrant from London and composed of black Masons was rejected by the existing white Masonic bodies. And the parallel Masonic organization was necessary to offer an opportunity for blacks to become Masons. It was a racial schism in Freemasonry, period. There were libraries written by mainly American white Masons trying to just justify this anomaly in the most moral and human institution. This is a quote from Emulation Ritual. But they can offer only whitewashing, pun intended, and no reasonable explanation. Since I arrived in Canada in the 90s of the past century, the situation got better. In most of the states and Canadian provinces, the white Grand Lodges and Prince Hall Grand Lodges recognize each other, and visitation is allowed. Not always, but things started going in the right direction, I hope. In the book, I describe the saddening case of Ontario's first black member of parliament and lieutenant governor, which is a kind of the viceroy, deputy king, so to speak, in the monarchy of Canada, who could not sit in the same lodge with his good friend, the Grand Master of the White Lodge, because the black guy, was the member of Prince Hall Lodge. So in other words, white Freemasonry was more retrograde than the society at large. So he could become a very respected politician, but he couldn't be in amity. His Grand Lodge wasn't in amity with the white Grand Lodge. So how can we claim being the most tolerant organization, fraternity, when we exclude, and now listen, half of the population of the planet, because they are women, all the men who don't adhere to our made-up religious requirements, plus those that we don't like. Now, to be honest, this last one is the only valid one for me, because I always tell this to the investigating committee. Be careful, because I would have to sit with him in the same lodge until one of us dies. So I don't mind being picky. Another personal note, if I may, in Europe, in Eastern Europe especially, we knew less about Prince Hall. Then I learned about it, and I was shocked, ashamed, uncomfortable. And let me tell you a really personal story. I met my present woman when I was already a Master Mason, because I came to Canada as a Master Mason. So when I started bragging about this venerable fraternity, I came to where I had to mention Prince Hall. And the schism number 3, which I will talk about soon. And it wasn't a simple moment. Suddenly, all my eloquent and dignified presentation collapsed. What the heck? You exclude black Masons and other Masons, not to mention women, and you think you are great? You don't have answer to that. You just become speechless and uncomfortable. So let's go forward to the next big schism, the schism number 3. Again, a little bit of historical retrospective. One of the first Grand Lodges formed, imitating the developments in England, was the French Grand Lodge, later renamed Grand Orient, which means simple Grand East, Great East. Many rituals and languages refer to the locations of Masonry as in the east of whatever. For example, in my mother jurisdiction, I was supposed to say that I was made Mason in the east of Budapest. The average Mason reacts hearing the words Grand Orient of France with the judgmental, the atheist. There is a misconception out there that as the belief in a supreme being is a condition of becoming Mason in the so-called regular obediences, so is the atheism a requirement in Grand Orient of France, which is far from the truth. So let's step back again and go to the origin. In the 1723 Constitution of Anderson, it says that we being only as Masons of the universal religion above mentioned, and so goes so on. And it says that the universal religion is in the first paragraph mentioned, that religion in which all men agree to be good men and true and men of honor and honesty. No supreme being, no revelation, no immortality of soul, and things like that. No rewards or punishments have ever been mentioned in connection with the universal religion of being good and true men. I could read you the whole paragraph about concerning God and religion from Anderson's Constitution, but it's pretty much the same. Though in ancient times Masons were charged in every country to be of the religion of that country or nation, whatever it was, yet this now thought more expedient only to oblige them to that religion in which all men agree, and so on, good man, true, and so on. Now, it's a very important thing because although we don't have documents proving that personal confession of belief was asked in those times or wasn't, we don't really know. My guess, and take it really as a guess, that about 300, 400 years ago, the one and only religious, philosophical, intellectual framework was Christianity in that part of the world. And not being Christian was considered a heretic deviation from the norm. So it didn't even occur to them to ask. That's my idea. And then came some decades of, well, somebody said that the history of Freemasonry is a constant, alternation of de-Christianization and re-Christianization of the craft. So today, Masons of various traditions are caught up in this confusion and this pendulum movement. Now, that Grand Lodge of France, which dates back allegedly around 1728 or 32, became in 1773, the Grand Orient of France, pretty much, and soon after that, the War of Independence of the American colonies started in 75. So, as we I'm not sure whether the requirement, and nobody is really sure, that requirement of belief existed from the very beginning, even in the Anglo-American Masonry, because no researcher gave till now a convincing evidence. Regardless, and what's this? The Grand Orient in 1849 introduced, because till then it wasn't formulated, but introduced the mandatory belief in its lodges and the use of the Bible in the lodges. So there was, and this fact is very rarely mentioned in the atheist narrative. Now, it's true, a few years later, and that's how it goes, the story, at the insistence of a Protestant minister, member of the Grand Orient, they removed that requirement in 1877 and all hell broke loose. Now, of course, the history is always more complicated because just about 10 years before that, or not even 10 years, around 1869, the Grand Orient recognized a Masonic group in Louisiana, which wasn't recognized by the local Grand Lodge. And some sources say that those were, again, what would be called colored people. And the Grand Lodge of Louisiana got so upset that they just withdrew recognition from the Grand Orient. And several other Grand Lodges, by the request of Louisiana, also followed. So they were not happy with the stance of the Grand Orient, saying that neither color, race, or no religion should disqualify a man from initiation. And because at that time, Louisiana, the Grand Lodge of Louisiana, like most of the Grand Lodges in the USA, strictly excluded blacks and those of mixed race from their membership. So then, of course, in 77, when this happened in France, that they changed the constitution, we also have to understand the historical background and circumstances. That was the period until the end of the century and up till the first years of the 20th century, when the French society struggled with a very important movement, or the movement struggled against the Catholic Church, and it's known by the French name laïcité, or which can be translated the secularization of the French society. So they wanted to take out the education, the school system, simple things like registering births and marriages and other life events by the laik, by secular authorities, the state. So they, in other words, they aimed the total separation of the church and state. Now, sometimes it didn't go well. At the end, after many decades of fightings, this happened. So now the French Republic is a totally secular state. But the Grand Orient of France and basically all the Freemasons were caught up in this struggle. And the French Freemasonry had to exist in those circumstances. And at certain point, our French brothers, who were recognized as brothers till that point, so they decided that freedom of conscience I repeat, freedom of conscience was more precious than enforcing any kind of religious dogma. Now, despite the popular belief, they did not impose mandatory atheism. They just do not ask the question whether the candidate believes or not, since they consider it a private matter, a matter of conscience, liberty, freedom of conscience. And since most of us don't read Masonic works written in French by French Freemasons, uh, of any French Freemason belonging to any existing Grand Lodges, they have quite a number of Grand Lodges, by the way. So we don't have a clear image of the events that went on after that ominous 77 event. We also don't want to take into consideration the centuries-old British-French imperial rivalry, which, by the way, defined even our history today, how they cut up the Middle East, but we don't want to talk about politics here. So now, since I am from Europe, where the parallel existence of the Anglo-American, self-titled regular, and the continental French, adogmatic Latin, etc., Masonry is more prevalent than on this continent, so the parallel existence is more prevalent. I just don't understand the gut reaction type of toward those Masons, brothers. In my experience, they are more educated because they are more picky about whom they admit. They are more intellectual, more philosophical, and the closest to the original ideas of what we, or some of us, consider Freemasonry. Now, we could write books, separate books about all these schisms, each of them. Few would read it, as it happens with many excellent contemporary Masonic authors. And I can give you a long list of living Masons, excellent authors of excellent books. And I have never heard them mentioned in our regular craft lodges. They mention only 200 years old authors. Now, and as a gesture to my host sister, we don't even touch here the exclusion of women in this paper, since that wasn't a schism per se. But I devoted a chapter in my book to that question, and which I close with the uncomfortable and, yes, provocative question for some. What if your wife joined the Masonic Lodge? I hope I made you curious enough to take a closer look at my book and recommend it to your brothers, sisters. It's there everywhere on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and all the major ebook retailers, plus all the paper book retailers from Amazon, Barnes Nobles, etc., etc. I can give you some links if you wish. And if you want the signed copy, write to me with your address, and I will give you instructions how to pay, and I will mail it to you. Thank you for your attention. This was my presentation of the book.
Thank you, brother, so much for this very informative presentation or discussion. I'm sure everybody has questions, and I would like to ask a question starting going forward. Now you mentioned the recognition about, with the Lodge in Louisiana and the Grand Orient of France. Now, I was not aware that it could have been Cajuns because most sources that I had, read about, read of the split, or non-recognition rather, it didn't even mention anything about, it just said that they were atheists. Didn't mention anything about race. That's one. But is there a way that you can point me in the right direction to get the correct information?
Um, well, at that time, when Louisiana withdrew the Grand Lodge of Louisiana withdrew their recognition from the Grand Orient of France, it was because the Grand Orient of France supported and recognized a Masonic group on the territory of the Grand Lodge of Louisiana. And as we know, the American doctrine in Freemasonry, and now almost the whole world learned about it, that on one territory, it can be only one Grand Lodge. This was a long-standing, how to say, doctrine in American Masonry, and from where it spread around the world. That's how I learned, which very conveniently, it was a very convenient excuse not to recognize the Prince Hall Masonry, because only one Grand Lodge can be in one jurisdiction.
Oh, okay.
And so basically, that first withdrawal of recognition was due to this, because Grand Lodge of Grand Orient of France recognized a, well, non-PC term, a colored group as Masons. And the atheism came later, because about, so this first event about that group recognition was in 1869, and the decision to remove the requirement of belief in a supreme being came 8 years later in 1877. But even after that, many American lodges kept the recognition till the end of the First World War, actually. And I guess the complete, they ceased to recognize it mainly later, after the First World War. Some of them were still in amity, some of them, I mean, talking about American Grand Lodges, but the Brits immediately after, I mean, England in 1877, immediately de-recognized, so to speak, the Grand Orient of France, and ever since they are like that. I don't know. The English the Grand Lodge of England, it still think as if they were a world empire, and they try to dictate to the whole world, and I am very unhappy about that. But that's my personal opinion. Nobody is asking me.
Thank you so much. Any other questions or comments from the floor? No?
I talk too much, I guess, and
No, you're
got bored.
fine. You're fine. I saw Joshua nodding his head a lot while you were speaking because he agreed.
Mhm.
Because he's one of our regulars that switched over to irregular to George Washington Union. So
Mhm.
he good for him to hear, different perspective and a point of view, stuff that, he agrees with a lot of the issues that exist in Freemasonry period. But yeah, I guess because he's on travel right now.
Mhm.
He said his device is rebooting. I guess everybody is getting
Mm.
updates today.
Oh.
So He'll be
I
on
I have
shortly.
to greet and mention that my present deputy Grand Master joined our group.
Oh,
Uh,
G.
Good morning, Right Worshipful Sir.
Good morning. How are you this morning? That was a great presentation, Ishben. I always enjoy it.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, here is Joshua.
Yes, I know he's gonna load you up with a lot of questions. I'll put you out there, Josh. I know you got a lot of questions. Oh, he's waiting for his audio. Oh,
Brother Istvan,
Yes.
on the beginning of your speech, you were mentioning like these three topics what you just talked about. Some one way or another they are connected, and I cannot figure out what is the connection exactly between the all three, because we were like jumping from one to another, and you went back to explain like how we came to that point, and I lost the connection between those three. If you can specify.
Yeah. Sorry, it means that I have to work on my presentation. But what I meant was, and still is, that they both were schism.
Schism, yeah.
So, I mean, not both, all three. In some way or other, they split Freemasonry, which was one, and then it became two, and then three. That's the common point, because even in the book they have the title, the schism number 1, number 2, and number 3. If you have the book, you
Yes.
yeah, so you can look it up. That was the common denominator for me, that these events uh, created, these separate Freemasonries of different type, like black and white, and believers and atheists. And the only one that was, how to say, reconciliation came only between the moderns and ancients. They got together in the United Grand Lodge in 1813, but the other two schisms were never healed, so to speak. They exist even today. That's
So
how.
we here in Canada we follow the modern.
Well, kind of. Well,
Because I'm confused why we don't say ancient free. Why we are ancient free if we follow the modern?
Well, because there was no such. That was just a nickname of the first Grand Lodge that the second Grand Lodge called them moderns, because they, according to the ancients, the second Grand Lodge, the 1717 Grand Lodge made a lot of innovations. They trying to modernize, allegedly, the Freemasonry, and that's why that was just a nickname, that, oh, the modern, those are not the real guys. So now they came together. Well, actually, what we have today in Ontario is, the ritual is based on emulation, which became the de facto accepted ritual of the new United Grand Lodge a few years later. So, and that was brought by McGillivray to Ontario, and that's what we use today, with a lot of changes along the many years since then. And even the structure, the officers, the arrangement of the lodge room uh, follows what is today. Even the color and the shape of our aprons, everything follows the Grand Lodge of England, which is not so strange or surprising considering that for a long, long time, this was where we lived, was just a colony of the British Empire. So,
Okay.
but thank you for a very good question. Good to clarify.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Very interesting.
You're welcome. I am glad you were here.
Are there any other questions from the floor?
I wouldn't pose a question. I'd make a couple of comments. It shouldn't be a surprise that I agree with most of what our good brother has said. In regard to the Supreme Council of Louisiana, I think most people who understand the history will agree that it was regular in its formation. The current concern, as I understand it, is that they have set up subordinate councils or lodges in other jurisdictions, such as New York. And under our current Masonic regime, we don't like that. And so that impacts, even if we were to come to a general sense of enlightenment, much as we did with Prince Hall, and say, yes, they were regular in their formation, I think that would still impediment to most in their recognition. In regard to Prince Hall recognition, working backwards, I'm a very active member under UGLE and just was at Lodge Friday and have gone through the Chairs and Lodge and 2 chapters. But we shouldn't minimize the UGLE impact on Prince Hall recognition. UGLE itself was a barrier and actually advised its members at one point not to attend American, and by American I mean US, Grand Lodges who were not in amity or who were in amity with their Prince Hall counterparts. Their reasoning being that they did not wish UGLE Masons to sit in lodge with Masons with whom they were not in amity. And that general proposition is still their view. As a UGLE Mason, you are expected to discreetly withdraw should you find yourself in that situation. But this itself led to issues in recognition, and it took some while and an actual sit down with the Grand Secretary of the United Grand Lodge of England to work through those issues. And I would pose a question for our mutual thought. We now have 4 state Grand Lodges that have not voted to recognize a Prince Hall Grand Lodge. And at some point, where do we go with that? In March of last year, United Grand Lodge of England, and specifically the Grand Chancellor, Paul Engham, worked out an agreement whereby the Grand Orient of Italy, which is the Grand Lodge the US state Grand Lodges are in amity with, and the regular Grand Lodge of Italy, the Grand Lodge with which UGLE was in amity, would not object to UGLE recognizing both. That was a hallmark. We could go through the history of how that division occurred, but that UGLE was able to work out that change in policy, noting it required the agreement of the other Northern European Grand Lodges as well to reach that. So that was the hallmark, in my view. Brother Ensign announced that at my lodge, Navy Lodge, in March, and was just delighted to do so. As Grand Chancellor of Utah, not in any other role, as Grand Chancellor of Utah, I wrote a letter to the 4 state Grand Lodges not in amity with their Prince Hall counterpart, pointing out that United Grand Lodge of England had managed to recognize both Grand Lodges in Italy without those Grand Lodges recognizing one another. I suggested perhaps that would work with Prince Hall and those Grand Lodges. Example, Utah could recognize the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of South Carolina with the consent of the State Grand Lodge of South Carolina, yet they did not have to enter into recognition. I received two very direct, to the point replies indicating that they would object to that. The other two Grand Lodges declined to reply. That sets up my suggestion of where will we go one day? Will the time come when some silly Grand Chancellor in a state Grand Lodge decides to say, we're going to recognize Prince Hall Grand Lodge of South Carolina? Full stop. I fear that may happen, not in Utah necessarily. I fear that may happen at some point. And then I fear the State Grand Lodge of South Carolina will remove recognition of its sister Grand Lodge. In my experience, when we exercise our almighty, powerful, and ever so grandmasterish pen to take those actions, it is the brethren who bear the brunt of our decisions, not us sitting in the Grand East. And so it is my fear and prediction that the schism that Istvan points out may itself lead to another schism. So my hypothetical for the Saturday morning.
Well, Glenn, I got a question for you. I'm glad you kind of brought up the issue on recognition. Now, I remember reading an article, can't remember where I saw it. It could have been Midnight Masons or something, like a few years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, where the article was talking about recognition during the times of war and how England, France, and the United States would help each other, Grand Lodges and its members out while they were dispersed throughout, World War I and World War II. And people still wanted to participate in the craft, whether they had to attend Grand Orient de France, they had to get raised there or passed there or initiated, or with Ireland or Scotland or whoever else was involved in the war. Why can't we condone that same behavior now? Like, why did it stop? I mean, I know the US has a lot of issues. I mean, has had a lot of issues in the past and still experiencing some things. No, we're trying to work to be better as citizens, but, it seems that we keep having interesting people and during these interesting times, causing division. But why can't we just, pick up from like World War II and just everybody just be one big family of Freemasons?
I
know I'm asking for a rainbow, a Sunday with rainbows and a cherry on top, but
you're wanting your
trying to
pink
hold
unicorn.
Recognition. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You're wanting your pink unicorn. That's what you're wanting.
Yes, I do.
I'm unaware of Grand Lodges not in amity providing ritualistic work for one another during that time. The better source of this story would be David Chechenadze of the Grand Lodge of Grand Lodge of Georgia 2015. Also remember the Grand Lodge of Lithuania.
Yeah.
Regarding assistance, his Grand Lodge, that is a button sometimes where we did not care about amity and who liked who and who was dating whom.
Right.
And ask David to relate that story, and maybe he and I can participate together in relating that story. So the point being that practical assistance, yes, but ritualistic conferrals and ceremonies, I'm unaware of that occurring. Are there matters with which we could participate? Yes. You see in France that Grand Lodge National, Grand Orient, and the other obediences, I don't all of them
You're freezing. You're freezing.
as okay. I've lost my Wi-Fi. That would explain that.
Okay.
I would point out that such do occur in some places, whether it be UGLE participating with the feminine Grand Lodges in England, or if it would be Grand Lodge National participating with the other French obediences in education matters. So that can still occur, and within limits of regularity, should occur in my view. You and I and others are aware that are some that are unworthy of carrying the name Mason. It has nothing to do with when their Grand Lodge was instituted. It has nothing to do with recognition. It is because of illegal and base acts. Those, no, I would decline to participate with them. But others, why not on matters of mutual interest, in my view? Recognize I do not speak for the Grand Lodge of Utah or any other Masonic institution.
Thank you. Josh, you have anything you want? I see you have made a statement.
Oh, no, I was just adding on to Brother Glenn's comment here about recognition, and I believe that's also the case with Valle de Mexico. No, there's a Grand Lodge in Mexico that is accused of setting up shop in other jurisdictions, and that's generally frowned upon.
Hi, Josh.
Hello.
Yes, as I put in the commission report, I think 2 years ago, they are unrepentant in which I like the language in their invasion of other jurisdictions, and they are not candid about it. When a Texas Mason drives by and takes a picture of their sign saying Valle de Mexico, and they deny such, it is not to their credit.
Oh, poor Texas.
I believe there's a famous song by an artist called Shaggy. It wasn't me.
Well, yeah, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes?
Right. My only final comment, and my own comment on this is, I mean, for me, I'm grateful to hear that other folks recognize that some of the issues that we face as a social organization are the same ones that I think some of us see, having, a company of historically marginalized communities right here on this call. It's one thing to talk about how we have these incredible high-minded ideals of, this perfect temple of humanity, of living stones, but then to also recognize that it's not always that way, and that we have work to do among ourselves and in our own lives to change those conditions if we really do imagine that we are constructing something that really does an edifice that brings together all of humanity. And that's my hope and my aspiration, and why I became a Mason, and why I continue to participate despite some of the challenges that I see, and that our brother here is so eloquently articulated throughout our history.
Well, you missed our speaker's question that he posed, because he posed it right when your device decided to reboot, about women being, how would the brothers feel if their wife would, I'm paraphrasing, were to be initiated into the craft. And I think that poses an interesting question for, a lot of guys. I know I'm going to, on the 30th, going to get my share of questions and answers. But it will be, kind of interesting to hear from the perspective of guys who have wives that are not Masons, and get their reaction.
Well, my fear is that she would do ritual better than me, and I'd be rather jealous. That's.
Well, I have a comment. It's a quippy thing, but I don't just think about my wife. You know, I have worked for women managers. I've worked at high levels within the U.S. federal government. I've worked with talented women colleagues. I know one woman who is she is a biologist with a PhD doing cancer research, and she's also an atheist. And you know, my question has always been, well, I know a lot of religious men who are not advancing science, and I have incredibly talented women friends who are advancing human knowledge and trying to save millions of lives. And the question for me is always, you know, why would my friend not be qualified to sit with me in lodge? And I think I've never really heard a satisfactory an answer that satisfies me beyond, well, this is just our tradition. And I understand tradition, but I also understand that if we hold ourselves to ideals of building this great society, we need great people, and some of them happen to be women. And I know for a fact some of them happen not to have religious faith as well. But those are only my personal comments. And again, I don't make them representing any Grand Lodge or any official Masonic jurisdiction.
Some people say tradition is pressure from dead peers.
I have seen that meme. But I will say, you know, Brothers of the Craft, they really, really love, you know, Ben Franklin, and he had the same statement, you know, just as, you know, yourself and Josh and many other men who feel that women can equally participate in the craft and, you know, share the knowledge, you know, because women are the future. You know, we give birth to the children, we are kind of their first teachers and mentors in life, and I don't see an issue with it. And for me, like growing up, like my family members, the males were in different organizations. Either they were Masons, they were Lions, they were Elks. So like, and then most of them was military. So growing up, I just used to see these clean-cut men participating in parades, and I was like, yeah, my husband's gonna be one of those guys one day, you know, like my dad was military, so that was just, you know, like they always had confidence, always well represented, and, you know, whatever. But my aim is to educate women of color in America that they can also participate in the craft. We are conditioned as, you know, little girls that we can only be Eastern Stars, and that is not true. And when I say women of color, I mean all flavors of the rainbow. You know, Native American, Asian, Middle Eastern, African American, African descent, Caribbean, the whole nine. So to get them, you know, like, cause I'm every day or every other day, I'm always meeting, cause I have Masonic license plates. I have the, you know, the symbol, the square and the compass, you know, decal on the back of my truck. So they were like, oh, your husband is Mason? No, I am. And that begins the conversation. So that is my hope, to, you know, get more women, you know, in America, you know, familiar with the craft, or a different craft, or whatever works for everybody. Okay, that's enough.
Being a woman does not mean that you cannot interpret Masonic symbolism and understand what we teach through our symbols.
That's true.
Sorry.
Oh, no. Hannah Mather Crocker, she actually put that in her writings. If you get the book from Karen Kidd, I think you did get the book, with all the Lady Masons from around the world. And then there's also, I think, it's Elaine Huntington and another co-author of hers. They also wrote a separate, they finalized Hannah's, her book, after, you know, because she was the mother of women's rights here in America and going forward. So she mentions that, you know, women are intellectually capable of, you know, performing and doing things, same thing as men in the craft. And to extent, again, bring up Benjamin Franklin and the one that nobody the one that's always got an interesting past, Albert Pike. He actually initiated a woman. So yeah, I'm going to keep it safe because I'm not going to say what I really want to say because I would like to have friends in the Southern jurisdiction, but I'm not going to. Lord Co-Mason is there first for a minute. But anyways, but thank you for this great lecture. And hopefully, if you want to come back in the future, I might have something else outside of this organization. I have to get more details, but it's in Vancouver. So it'll be closer to home for you. So I guess we can wrap up for today. Thank you everybody for coming to our speaker.
Thank you for the invitation.
Anytime. I just wish today I was a little bit more organized. You know, computer likes to reboot and do updates when it wants at inconvenient times. Anyways, thank you guys. And I wish Pascal did not log out because I wanted him to meet Josh. But Josh, can you hang back for a second?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, Josh is in trouble, isn't he? He has to stay and see the teacher.
That's what always getting detention and being asked to stay after class. It's my MO in life.
And I'm to shovel and snow blow 6 inches of snow. So you have a good afternoon.
It's snowing here too. I don't know how much we will get.